Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book, Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. Two, because I'm a fan of punk music. And three, it's just more fun, right? Anyway, if this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. And please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. Anyway, that's enough for me right now. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Eric Klimek, and we will get to, or we will see, or we'll hear Nooshin Alibai, and Eric and Nooshin are the co-founders and the COO and CEO, respectively, at Support Bench. So Nooshin's not here right now because she's got a whole bunch of stuff that she's doing. She is a founder, she's a technology leader, but she's also a mother, and so she's having to look after do something with the kind of kids. So if you hear kind of a screeching car and a crashing of doors kind of halfway through this, that'll be Nooshin arriving, and we'll bring her in as and when she arrives. But first off, Eric, how are you doing? Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here, or having us here. Doing pretty great.
Excellent.
It's a beautiful day. So
awesome. Now, this podcast has been a bit of a movable kind of like target over the last couple of weeks because, you were stuck in traffic. Nooshin wasn't feeling very well. I wasn't feeling very well. And so it's been moving around. So we're finally here. It's not kind of perfect. We're not all together, but hopefully we'll be together before the end, which is great. But so to set the scene and tell us a little bit more about Support Bench, Eric, could you tell me a little bit about you, a little bit about the work you do, the kind of the origin story, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the CTO of Support Bench, and I'm kind of like you. I'm one of those oddballs that really loves customer support and customer experience. Been doing it my professional career, and still absolutely love doing it. So just to give you some background on how this whole thing started, like I was mentioning, I've been in support my entire life. I started off from serving to bartending to working in MSP, working the front lines, and working myself up inside of enterprise in the enterprise support space until I ended up in a big enterprise hypergrowth company locally here, and that's where I kind of got all of my experience inside of B2B enterprise support. I've done pretty well everything from there, from front lines to back lines to manage the support operations team, manage the local customer support team, and eventually, by taking over the ops team inside of the company, I realized that we couldn't find any kind of solutions to be able to match the complexities inside of that organization. And because we couldn't match those complexities, because of my technical background, I kind of built my own ticketing system and customer support system inside of the organization. I kind of went to 600 different agents and 100,000 customers, and it became a raging success. And that's where I kind of realized this huge gap in the market where nobody's really serving these types of companies. And I needed to solve it. I not just for not just for myself, but I knew that there's so many people out there that are struggling with this problem, and there's only a few different solutions out there that even can manage that type of complexity, but they lack that customer experience, and not only the customer experience, but the agent experience to be able to manage these types of large scale customers. And so that's what I'm out here and with Machine doing, is trying to be able to solve this problem. Yeah.
Nice. And because I remember when we talked in the setup to this this podcast, you told me that there are, and like sort of you've alluded to this that just then, is that you told me that there are 4 types of solutions out there in that sort of like support help space. There are business to consumer ones, there is IT help desk ones, there's CRMs, and there's contact centers, and they're all trying to do sort of different sort of things. But you also pointed out that none of them are really built exclusively for B2B or the B2B space, where it has an emphasis on what you called kind of customer health and revenue retention. And I wanted to ask you, given that you've kind of been in the weeds around this, like both operationally and also building it, is why is that, do you think? I mean, why have we not seen, so because the B2B space is such a big space, is it because it's just such a complex nut to crack?
I think that that's a loaded question, because there's a lot of different parts to it. I'll kind of split it up, because this is a hypothesis, because when I've been in the space a lot and seen a lot of different kinds of solutions come and go, and kind of seen the rise over the last 12 years of the kind of the mainstream players that you see today. And they all kind of been bred with innovation about 12 years ago or 13 years ago to be able to build something that was actually simple to use. And they focused a lot on simplicity to be able to kind of get the job done. But so they kind of taken by storm the B2C space. And because frankly, the B2C market is really easy to be able to build for. Clients are small. They don't really care about retention. They just really need to be able to manage volume really well. They just don't have a lot of complexities. Their biggest problem was being able to integrate with different systems. So the players that were able to build marketplaces where you could quickly connect to something else just to be able to get something visible, to be able to get the job done, were the successful ones. So the big successful players out there. But the other guys, all the big guys, all the enterprises out there, they're not using any of these players. They're still on the traditional sales CRMs, or they built their whole home ingrown solutions, or they're still running those old systems like Oracle CX, which was built off of a company called Right Now, which was built in 1997 or something like that, right? Yeah. Like and it's just the maturity of it. And because they were always kind of built for that complexity, they still reign king inside of that type of market. So you kind of have these mishmash of systems that are trying to solve problems, especially for the small business space, where they don't yet have a lot of complexity. And a lot of people solve it with either an IT type of solution, which has a specific type of that are really good at things like asset management. And then you have call centers, which is really good at calls and volume and just high volume type of centers. Then you have your B2C, which is really good at e-commerce. And then you have and then you have your CRMs, which is better at complexity, but they were inherently built from sales and sales tools. So they're really good at data management, but they're terrible at at managing the customer experience both internally and externally. So why is it kind of important now? And why is health and retention now? So that's kind of the second part of your question.
Yeah.
I don't think it. I think people, especially on the higher end, not the smaller ones, are starting to kind of realize that every revenue model now is moving towards a SaaS model, which is make it a service. And inherently, by doing that, the cause is that all of a sudden customer retention is really important. Customer insight, customer health, everything about it is really, really important. that's why you're seeing this huge emphasis on customer experience and customer success and customer support. Customer success is bred off of that, and that idea or this change in the market that's happening. But now all of the bigger players are kind of moving in that direction, and they're scrambling to be able to create these high margin products and these high margin services, and so to be able to go. So there's a lot in there.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is a lot in there. Is there an added complexity also in the B2B space that, as opposed to the B2C space? Because the B2C space, you kind of, the customer and the user are generally the same person, right? But in the B2B space, the customer could be a named faceless organization, but you end up with maybe hundreds, if not thousands, of kind of like users, and they might all have support and help requirements, and that adds a degree of complexity, because you've always got to think about how do you put all that sort of together, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, 100%. Like when you're talking about that type of complexity, it's like, okay, so I was most people, especially like there's a lot of B2B companies that are using these B2C solutions, these smaller business solutions, and that's totally fine, because a lot of these guys, they don't really need that complexity. They'll have these one-time interactions. So if you have a revenue model or a customer that is not giving you a ton of revenue, you don't really need a lot of touch points for it. Their customer experience is going to be how fast can I get a refund, and how easy it is to be able to solve this invoice problem. And 3 interactions later, it's kind of done. But if you have a customer, if you're a business and you have a customer and their contract is worth $1 million every single year in recurring revenue, chances are, if they're paying you $1 million a year, they're going to be very highly active with you, because they're going to ensure they extract as much value out of the product and out of your services as possible. And everybody is going to be jumping on these types of customers. You're going to have your sales involved, and that are going to need full visibility. You're going to have your success team involved. That's going to need full visibility. Your marketing team is probably going to be interested in talking to them and knowing everything about them so that they can better sell to these types of customers. Then your product is going to be super interested in it. You have and of course your customer support team. And in the middle of it, your customer support team has to deal with all of these different people that need to touch this customer and need to understand it all the time. There's that complexity of it, and managing that data and that experience for it is pretty tough. These customers that are paying you $1 million a year, they're probably contacting you at least 15, 20 times a month, maybe right. at minimum, and touching different parts of your organization. You'll have escalations, you'll have something else going on. Chances are, if something were to happen to this customer, and a big thing were to go down or happen, the first person that they're going to go knocking on is the VP of sales, and which is going to go knock on the CEO's door, which will blow up everything. These other companies don't really have that complexity. If one person churns, who cares? But if these guys churn, it's a big deal.
And you might not have heard the kind of the screeching of the car, or the crashing of the door, but Nushin has arrived. Hooray! So now we're going to kind of chop it up a little bit and go, hey, Nushin, kind of welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Oh, thank you so much. I made it. I am super mom. I am amazing. Everything is sorted. And I'm hoping I'm in the middle of all the good stuff.
No, you are. I mean, Eric was just telling me about kind of the origin story of Support Bench, and was also talking about, we were talking about different types of solutions that are out there for, help and support, and how there's not a lot of, if you like, innovation.
Yeah.
Or in that sort of B2B space. And I was asking kind of Eric about kind of like why he kind of like why he thinks that. Is that just because due to the complexity, or that everybody's working on old systems and stuff? I mean, so it'd be great just to jump in and get your take on that as Eric's kind of co-founder and kind of like disruptor in partner in chief, as it were.
Yeah, I think from if you're starting a company in customer support, case management, or ticketing, and you can do well making a really simple solution that people can use for high volume, you're just going to do that. And that's what the typical ticketing case management system does.
Mm-hmm.
So for you to pivot and build for complexity means you are building this robust, feature-rich system. And, I think the pros and cons of what it's going to cost you to build a system like that, the people, the developers you're going to need with the experience in case management and customer support who are going to build that is just a huge undertaking. So that's what we were thinking, is maybe nobody's built it because you can do just as well building a really basic, simple ticketing system, and you can hit that $1 billion mark. Why would you build for complexity? But we never set out to make this behemoth company. We set out to solve this problem. Eric, 20 some odd years, was looking for this system and said, I'm just going to build it myself, and continued to build another and improve upon. And it's all coming from like a passion project of customer support mixed with development. What can you build for these complex enterprise B2B companies? So I think because it came from a place of passion and interest, the building of it didn't seem so much of a heavy lift. It seemed exciting to him and interesting, and yeah. So
no, I mean, I know about this this kind of problem. I've experienced it sort of before, in that I've had people that I've worked with that say they've been a B2B manufacturer of like high-tech products that are used out in the field by various kind of places. That, one client was a global organization. They had multiple places of manufacturing kind of locations, but those factories, their products were sold around the world to different people around the world. And then, because you have very domain specific information centered around those products and those manufacturing kind of locations, it's hard to kind of almost collect all that information and disseminate it. So it's almost like pushed out to the front line. So when, like, say, somebody who bought a product that was made in the States, but they're based in sort of Malaysia, and they're trying to use it, but the US kind of like US factories kind of like close, and and they don't have time to wait to get access to that information, and all these different sort of all these. That's just one example of how I feel like the complexity in real life when somebody's using something is to come to life. I mean, so I'm just thinking about Eric. Nushin alluded to the fact that you've built it. I mean, in your previous kind of like life, but I guess you're kind of building it again, as it were, and building it better. I mean, so can you tell me a little bit about what is it that you've actually kind of built? Because otherwise it sounds like magic.
Yeah. You know what? I like to, the way that I always describe it is like, if you're familiar with the different platforms out there,
mm-hmm.
if Salesforce and Zendesk had a baby, that's kind of what we would be. We're that company that kind of, the system itself was really built to understand that data is the foundation of any organization.
Mm-hmm.
Those companies like the traditional ticketing systems, they do really great for the simplicity, but nothing is integrated into it, which doesn't allow to do anything interesting. So their customer success system is a totally different section. Their analytics is going to be a totally different area, and you need different programs. You need to Frankenstein these programs in order to make it all work. Support Bench was built on the idea that we need to be able to make something that has all of these different tools integrated into one place, so that we can own the data, so that eventually we can do really interesting things in terms of automation, in terms of revenue prediction, in terms of churn prediction, in terms of ticket prediction, SLA prediction. Everything is about being able to automate the one. A smart man once told me that everybody's been focused on customer deflection, is deflecting the customer away.
Mm-hmm.
But we're kind of focused on saying, actually, you know what? We know that no matter what, KB article is great. Trying to deflect them is great, but customers are going to get to us. and no matter what. So we have to prepare for it. And that's kind of what the system is kind of built for, to kind of prepare for that inevitability of it. And how can we provide an awesome customer experience to the customer when they actually talk to one of our people? It's about building those customer relationships.
Yeah.
And that's kind of really what that is. It's really good at a lot of different things. It's not just one thing, because it has to.
It also feels like a bit like, I mean, because Nushin Eric was talking earlier about how, the nature of sort of the B2B customer relationship is different, because you almost like if somebody is calling in for help, then, and you're gathering all this stuff all the data in one place, all the interaction, the records and the history and things, that it's more than just a transactional history. It's like a use history and a service and repair history and all these different sort of things. And marketing's want to have sight of that, and successes want to have sight of that, and sales want to have sight of that, because you've got to look at, with this move to servitization, or like a subscription-based kind of like type of economy, that it seems to me that what you're trying to do is also build a system that's possibly going to solve for many of the problems that organizations rather face, i.e. this kind of siloed kind of nature. And if it's all in the one place, then you kind of knock down those kind of barriers. You don't have to do the organizational change, because almost the platform does it. I mean, is that right?
I think so. And I think that's such a good description of what companies are facing now is, when things were happening really separate and you were creating budgets for each department and they didn't need to communicate as much with each other, and everything's different, and the subscription-based model changed everything. And if you've seen where funding has been put, in software, the CRM space is massive, but the biggest portion of the CRM space has always been sales and marketing. And for the first time ever before, the largest, most rapidly growing revenue marker in the CRM space is customer support, customer experience, case management. That's where most of the funding is going. And I think exactly what you're describing, companies, particularly complex B2B companies, are needing to take a really holistic approach, because now customer retention is massively important. Customer churn can be debilitating. These aren't, one-touch communication. This is customers you want to bring in. You want that opportunity to talk to them. You need to know their sentiment. You need to know how they're feeling, because the only indication you have of potential churn is all the things you're doing in the background with that communication. So much of sales is now getting referrals and being able to highlight those champion customers. So much of your marketing is coming from customer feedback. It's just, you have to, if you're not taking a really holistic approach in your company and really including every department and giving each department oversight and insight, and it's all coming from your business critical case management. If you're not doing that, I think a lot of companies are falling behind. They're not improving efficiencies. They're not catching people before they leave, and they're not creating additional, revenue cycles.
Yeah,
absolutely. I totally agree with you.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I think, it's and the retention part is going to become increasingly important. I mean, given the sort of the environment that we're currently kind of going through, it's the economies are increasingly tightening, and we're dealing with kind of higher than normal sort of inflation and things, and we're seeing people kind of cutting jobs preemptively and things, and so yeah, it's critical. Competition is going to go up, and in retention is going to be absolutely key. But maybe to bring this to life a little bit, it might be useful if I can come to each of you and say, give me an example. Bring this to life. Tell me a story about, say, a brand that you've kind of worked with, or an organization that you've worked with, and sort of what problems they've faced, what they were doing before, and then they've moved to kind of support bench, and kind of what they've been able to do now, and how they've kind of benefited, just so to bring this whole thing sort of to life, and so we can understand the kind of differences. And all right, why don't I come to you first with a give me a story.
Okay, so I'll tell you one. I'll tell you two stories.
Okay.
Because it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell one, because when you build something that can solve a lot of different problems, everybody has a different problem in their organization that they need to be solved, and so they use our program in vastly different ways. So I'll give you one example. Is a large trucking company and logistics company inside of Canada. I think they are the biggest in Canada, and they're using our software. They started off their problem has always been not about the retention piece, but managing the complexity of talking to internal departments as well as external customers. They have vendors, they have customers, they have internal. It's so complicated. I don't really understand it, to be honest.
Is it like a fusion of kind of external and internal service?
Kinda. Like they deal with warehousing and logistics and deliveries and shipments, and they have a ton of different departments that need to talk to each other constantly. And they could never find a solution where they were able to solve how to gain insight in and see exactly what's going on. The only way they could actually do it is through Outlook, and with a couple of shared inboxes. They've tried ticketing systems, they've tried CRMs, they've tried a bunch of different types of communication services, but they were never able to actually use them to communicate properly with each other internally and externally, and with these vendors. But we were able to come in there, and because we're able to manage that complexity, because we solved a different problem, they were able to use it to solve their problem and holistically bring on their entire organization with all these different teams that are completely siloed inside of the organization, but yet they can talk to each other, and anybody can go in there and look at a particular vendor or a particular internal customer and see everything that's going on inside of this one 365-degree view. And they just keep adding and moving one more team onto it and to the next. So it's been a really great success story. But they've been doing it to be able to solve communication problems. Another customer that we had uses it as a totally different solution, which is the predictive churn, escalation management, and knowledge-centric support. The one thing about a lot of B2B customers, because a lot of when a B2B customer starts kind of scaling up, they start quickly encountering a lot of complexities, and especially when they're higher revenue customers. They started finding that they had 6 different systems to be able to get the job done. And ever since we kind of came on board, we got rid of all 6 systems, put it all into one solution. And I think their customer sat rating is something like 99%, and they can see everything. Anything that kind of happens, everybody's kind of notified before any alarm bells go off. So they've found some incredible success using our product that way.
Awesome. 2 very different kind of like different stories. And Nushin, do you have a story you want to add, or stories?
I just have like a quick one, but we actually have this education tech company, and it's a software company. So they actually built their own sort of homegrown system that they were handling their ticketing from, and then shifted over to Support Bench. And I think one of the things that makes us a little different is when they were migrating over, you're onboarding in this new system and you're having to learn it and everything. But one of the things they said that was most unique about us is every single person they had their touch points with in Support Bench had experience in customer support. So whether they were talking to some like our frontline support person or our frontline developer or our frontline trainer, everybody had a history in customer support. So when they were onboarding on Support Bench, they were able to ask all of our people, what do you think of the way we do this? What do you think of our process here? And we've so many years in this industry, it was so easy for us to say, why don't you just sort of rejig this whole system? So we're able to go sort of beyond the system and help them create efficiencies in their case management and customer support just because of our experience in that particular space.
Nice.
So I would say that was significant too.
Awesome. It's great. I think the thing I like about the idea, and it seems to be I know that Eric, you kind of mentioned it before, this kind of like how many people are plagued with the Frankenstack type of approach.
Yeah, that's a good description.
And it's like people complain about, ease of integration or having to work off multiple applications and all these different things, and how it can have an impact on productivity and efficiency and communication and all these different sort of things. But bringing it all together in one place, then it's tailored for the complexities that are inherent within a business to business operation. It feels like a really great step and really kind of useful, not an insignificant or an insignificant kind of undertaking. I observe, you've been in the weeds for this for a long time, but so it's like I tip my hat to you, kind of trying to, having built that sort of thing. And I would definitely say that, I'm going to definitely kind of be watching this sort of space and to see kind of you guys kind of take the world kind of by storm, or at least the B2B world by storm. And because one of the reasons I want, it's a very specific story. It's about support, it's about help, it's about service, it's about experience, but specifically kind of for B2B because it addresses that particular kind of problem. So I really kind of enjoyed that. And also the other kind of thing is, no disrespect, Eric, but you're also kind of led by kind of Nusheen, kind of like, who is a lady in the tech kind of industry, but also a lady of color in the tech industry as well. And I'd like to say that it's different. It's not usual, but it's great. And I'm applauding, going like, fair play to you, for smashing down some kind of barriers and kind of like, and rewriting the rules on that and stuff. And I also wanted just to ask you about kind of like, almost like circle back to the beginning and go, Nusheen, like, how the hell did you get into one technology and B2B and kind of service and support, just as we kind of round this all off sort of thing? Because I think that's I think it's an important and a really interesting kind of part of the story as well, given particularly when Eric talks to you about you're dealing with truckers and things. And so it's not the most traditional sort of space to be operating in.
So our story, I think, is fabulous, but it is very different. We sort of did everything in reverse. Eric and I met dancing many, many years ago, and we happened to fall in love and get married, and we had a baby. And as soon as we had our baby, Eric had this inspirational idea that he should develop this platform. And when we had our second baby, he said, so can you be Support Bench's first investor? Because I'm going to quit my job and you're going to take care of us. And of course, you typically in a pair, you typically have one high risk partner and one risk averse partner. And of course, we are two high risk people that are together and seem to be in one with that. And I said, yes, we have two babies. You should definitely quit your job and build Support Bench. And we tried to find investors because we had this incredible idea. It was very challenging early on. We didn't have a lot of customers. We didn't have a ton of revenue. We only had, the starting version. So of course, my suggestion was, why don't we sell our house and personally invest in Support Bench?
Wow.
Once again, a little bit high risk. And he built this incredible thing and ready, like the MVP was ready and it was time to get customers on board. And my background was in sales. And I said, okay, here's when I come in. So when our children were very small, I jumped on board and started working full-time on Support Bench. And he and I did everything scrappy under the sun to onboard our first 25 customers. And one of them was an enterprise client, and it gave us an enormous operating budget. And then we were able to pick and choose our investors and advisors. And it was wonderful at that moment for exactly what you're describing. I was a woman of color in tech. There were definitely some challenges early on. We happened to get a group of investors that thought that was absolutely fantastic and couldn't help but lift us. And one of our investors is, we're venture backed. And it's been wonderful because one of the customers we got was a global bank, and we were able to say, no, we're not going to take this customer. It's exhaustive. It's going to take a lot of resources. But because we had these awesome investors giving us so much confidence to just go after what we wanted, we had so much support, we were able to pick and choose our customers. And so we have a good group of our own customers, a good group of investors, and then our personal team is just spectacular. And I give a lot of credit to some awesome investors and advisors. And of course, my awesome husband.
Well, I knew you were kind of partners and the top exec team. I did not know that you were partners in life as well.
Okay.
So that's kind of another layer onto it. It's a bit like, it's literally, it's like being built in the back room.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Our meetings are very, very easy, Adrian. They happen at 2 a.m. and 2 p.m. They're fantastic. We don't have to have Zoom calls. I don't have to book appointments. And our date nights are very Support Bench related.
I mean, it's like that is commitment. But well, kind of fantastic. What a great story, and I wish you all the best. But before I want to just move on to some general sort of stuff, because I always find it interesting when you talk to people that are in this sort of like space, is rather than just talking about what they're doing and also their kind of clients, is also can you sort of get their perspective on kind of broader sort of like stuff. But before we do that, I just wanted to ask: is there anything that you wanted to add about Support Bench kind of like story, but that we've kind of like missed out that you want to kind of highlight? Eric, what do you think? Anything missed out?
You know what? I really just think right now is just an amazing time to be innovating inside of customer support. I think for the last 10 years or 12 years, customer support has kind of seen a ton of innovation inside of certain space, but I don't think the market knew exactly what it needed until just recently. And I think that's why you see all these products that are just flooding the market to be able to solve all these different problems with experience and success and all these different things. And I think it's a great time to be alive inside of customer support to problem solve and make this whole industry better, this whole market better.
Awesome. Nooshin, anything you'd like to highlight?
No, I'm just happy I got to join for as much as I did. I feel so lucky.
Well, then maybe I'll flip to the next kind of like one and ask you kind of like, we've come out of the last couple of years, which I'm calling the pandemic years, and I've been asking people to reflect on what are sort of the biggest lessons that you've learned that will inform what you do going forward. What do you think?
That's a really good question. I think like COVID and the pandemic has changed so much about the way that we interact with each other. Traveling to see each other is sort of like a thing in the past. People aren't doing business travel. Being in offices just doesn't seem to be the norm. And I think because people are working from home and working in private spaces, they're relying on their tools more so now than even before. And I think if there aren't more tools like Support Bench, if there aren't more tools that are all encompassing and all inclusive and can handle that which people need when they're working in private spaces and from home and needing to access every bit of information and get every bit of oversight and insight. I think if tools can't do that, I think they're going to be rapidly obsolete. Managers don't have the opportunity to walk around spaces and see how their staff is doing, not just because of the pandemic and COVID and working from home, but also with office spaces being all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
You need tools that not only can manage all of these people and give you insight and oversight, but also manage time zone differences. And I think a lot of these ancient, old legacy dinosaur tools are going to get dusty real quick if they don't catch up.
Wow, awesome. So, and I'm going to go to kind of Eric and ask you kind of my next question that I have on my list, which is, and this is probably one of the hardest ones, so prepare yourself. So there's a lot of talk in the service and experience sort of space and how to improve things and how to drive better outcomes and stuff. Now, if I was to say to you, if you were to boil it all down, and what would be your best advice to somebody listening in that wants to improve their customer and employee experience? You go, and it'd be like, Eric says, do this, ... What would be your advice?
I think that even today, not enough companies realize that the customer management side, that's specifically customer support, is your primary gateway to understanding your entire business. You drive marketing from it, you drive product from it, you drive sales from it. It is the gateway to understanding your customer. And most people still don't understand that yet. If you don't make your customer support piece a pillar of just as important as marketing or product or sales, then I think you're going to be in big trouble. Like going forward, everything is driven by it, and it's just going to be the path forward. Make sure that that is the pillar of your organization, and everybody in your company should be talking to customers. I still fundamentally believe that, or at least having some type of interaction or visibility into what customers are doing, how they're doing it, how they're being talked to, how you're positioning yourself, how you're building product for them, how you're solving their problems. Everybody in the team should be talking to your customers and having visibility into what they do. I fundamentally believe that it is the key to success.
Yeah, no, I hear. I mean, I have always been a massive advocate of the idea that, if you want to know what's going on with your customers, they go and talk to the people that are talking to your customers on an hourly or daily or weekly basis. It's like, it's not rocket science, right? And you should be all up in that, because generally, and it's not, and it's like that soft data. You can talk to people and they'll tell you sort of thing. And then there's a hard data that gets collected. But like, if you want access to it, go talk to the people and they will tell you everything that you need to know. And if you have to do that kind of like more broadly or grandly sort of thing at scale, then it's like having access to all that kind of data that tells you about what's happening and when it's happening and what the problems are and all these different sort of things. It's like you get so much smarter if you understand your history.
100%. Just to use your example, that hard data and that soft data, I always think of the example is that a lot of people rely on that hard data to be able to drive decisions. And if somebody is using your product and you see that they're using a certain function all the time, you're going to say, great, that's fantastic. Let's move on to something else to be able to build out to make them sticky somewhere else. And not realizing that piece that they're using constantly is actually a big pain point for customers that are doing it, that are using that feature on a daily basis. So, and if you don't talk to the people that are dealing with those customers that are complaining about it all the time, you might still be getting an NPS score of 8 or 7, but really, if they're having a bad experience with it on a day-to-day basis and complaining to your support people with those whispers, and they're, you're at real risk of damaging that relationship. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
Yeah. It's that sort of thing. You kind of got to, I think you kind of that small data, soft data, that sort of insight. I'm a collector of quotes, and one of my favorite quotes comes from a linguistic scholar, Polish American linguistic scholar called Alfred Korzybski. I think that's right. And he says the map is not the territory. And I think the idea that hard data sometimes is the map, but sometimes you've got to go further to really understand the territory and kind of what that requires. And that might be going and talking to customers or going to talk to the people that kind of talk to customers, because that will add kind of like the contours and the potholes and the weather systems and all these different things that you don't get on your map. So you understand what it is, the environment and all the real kind of problems that customers face. And that's the richness. And the richness will leads to really, really kind of like deep insights, which can then help make your life easier as well as your customers' lives easier.
Yeah, I love that quote. It's a great quote.
So a couple of final kind of things as we kind of wrap up. And Nushin, I explained these questions to Eric at the beginning because it's like because you were on children duty. But what I've been doing is, so let me explain them very quickly. So I've been asking these questions to people that I've been speaking to, and it's about the Punk CX books that I wrote. And the first one I wrote was Punk CX, and I followed it up with Punk XL. Punk CX was based on this hypothesis that the service and support base is starting to look a lot like or exhibit the same characteristics as the progressive rock space in the 1970s, and punk explored at the back of it with this DIY democratic approach. And I think kind of the service and support base is starting becoming overly complicated, elaborate, self-indulgent, all these different things, and loses sight of its constituents, i.e. its customers. If that was true, then the book is about what would a punk version of CX look like. And I've been asking people kind of like to do this word association. If I said punk and CX, what would you say? So that's kind of like, that's the setup for the first question. And the second question is a development on from that, which is called Punk XL, which is about the idea that we need to think more holistically about customer experience. So we need to include employee and stakeholder and vendor and partner and also kind of think about the impact that our experience has on the broader kind of wider world. And I'm sort of asking people for who they think is setting the bar, who's kind of like thinking about those things in a different way. So I've collected lots of these kind of words. The first question is, what one or two words, I'll give you time to think about this, Nushin, because I'll go to Eric first.
Okay, thank you.
You got the preview. So Eric, I'll come to you. What one or two words would you use to describe a punk approach to customer experience?
The one word that I would use is unity.
All right.
Does that make sense?
I like it. It. I don't think that's on the list. And there's over 150 words on the list.
Yes.
So that's cool. So Nushin, follow that.
Oh my God. I want to say one-stop shop, but I can't say that.
I know I stole it because really our entire business is built on that one word, which is kind of funny. Go ahead.
How about oversight? That's not very sexy. Maybe insight. I think I like insight better.
Okay, I like that one too, and I'm pretty sure that's not on the list either.
Okay,
so that's cool. I mean, this is a broad church, and that's the me collecting all these words is to show people that actually taking the punk approach to something is not about having green hair and kind of like wearing kind of like lots of piercings and tattoos and all that sort of like stuff, and necessarily like you don't have to like punk music, but when people understand what taking a punk approach, they understand what it means. It's about daring to be different, right? And going your own way. So Eric, back to you. What company or brand do you think is an experienced leader?
Ooh.
This is going to be one that you will think that you think I'm going to be crazy, but they have done such huge strides in everything. Especially in terms of cloud, I would say Microsoft. And
Ooh.
the reason why, I see that faith. The reason why, and that word unity is something that they've kind of figured out in the enterprise space, because they're masters at the enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And the enterprise requires unity. And they knew 10, 15 years ago that the entire industry was going to this revenue model, and they doubled down on Microsoft Azure and made a cloud service that was just not server infrastructure, but was to be able to manage all the complexities of software, service, hardware, and with all of these different problems of security, all inside of one platform, and everything is accessible through APIs, and not only that, their support is great, and which is I would say every single time I reach out to Microsoft, you're always going to get an expert, you're always going to get your problem solved, and they're going to be really fast at doing it, especially in the cloud space. Yeah, they're fantastic at it. Yeah,
awesome. Nushin, what do you think? Who do you think, which brand or organization you would you describe as an experienced leader?
So I recall, when Eric and I were like, we're going to build this amazing, revolutionary, innovative case management system. We wanted to be like partners. We wanted to be the best of the best in customer support and case management. And so one of the companies actually we followed was Zappos. And okay. I don't know if you recall, but they had this amazing connection and customer support and communication with their clients. And we sort of used that as an example of how to support best, how to have the happiest customers. And I think we used it as an example for ourselves to make people happy and to be their partners.
Perfect example. We like Zappos. I know some people there visited them as well, and there's an acknowledgement in the Punk Excel book about Tony Hsieh passing away, kind of like late last year. So Tony, if you're listening, rest in peace.
Oh, it's lovely.
But anyway, that's all I have for today. I just want to say, Nushin, Eric, thank you for sharing your time and your insight and experience with me today. And congratulations on the journey that you've embarked on. Congratulations on the success that you've had today. And yeah, just Nushin, glad you could make it. Glad that we could actually finally get it kind of like all scheduled.
Me too.
And so, yes, thank you so much. That's been great.
Thank you for hurting my brain with your brain teaser questions, Adrian. This was awesome. This is a great day.
This is phenomenal. Thank you.
Our day's just beginning and it started really well, so I appreciate it.
Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. But one final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.